What's up, YouTube? It's your girl T. Welcome to T's Corner. We're going to call today's segment Let's Talk Movies. And I will warn you now that there are spoilers, so if you have not seen the movie that I'm prepared to talk about, please stop the video now, watch the movie, then come back. We're going to talk about The Sound of Christmas on BET Plus. This is a new Christmas movie this year, and it's starring Soraya McNeil and Neo. Soraya plays Montana, and Neo, yeah, you guys know the rules. I have notes. And then I wrote them in highlighter orange so they're not really visible. Neo plays Quentin. And let's see. I'll just run down The Sound of Christmas cast list. There's Rio, played by Michael Anthony. Daniel is played by Blake James. Deidre's played by Elijah Kai. Gerard is played by Jesse Malinowski. Chloe is played by Drea Michelle. Estelle is Roxanne T. Mims. Quentin is Neo. Alexis is Jennifer Sears. Montana is Soraya. And that's about it. So, it's based on a book by Tiffany L. Warren called The Replacement Wife. And we start out with Montana and Rio. Montana and Rio are a couple. They are living together. They are, decorating their Christmas tree. And Rio says, as is their tradition, once they finish putting the decorations on the tree, they have a drink. And he looks at her and he says, I know you don't do this, but it's tradition. We have to make an exception for tradition. And then we find out that Montana has turned her life over to Christ about a year ago. And so she does not drink anymore. And so I felt like while Rio was saying one thing, his actions were showing another, because he says, I know that you're in the church now, you're a Christian now, whatever, you don't drink anymore, you've stopped that part of your life. I understand that and I respect that. So that's what he's saying while he's handing her an alcoholic drink. So I'm like, the fact that you're handing her this drink and expecting her to drink it because it's tradition says that everything you just said was a lie and you don't respect her decision to make any changes. And then he suggests, they go to bed, and she's like, I can't keep having non-marital sex with you if I'm saying that I have turned my life over to Christ and I'm living this way. I can't say one thing and do another, so we have to, cut that out. And he was like, what, we can't drink, we can't have sex, our whole relationship is just over because you decided to get in line with Jesus? And she was like, so that's all our relationship is, sex and alcohol? And he was like, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying, look, whatever, let's just go in the bedroom, let's relax, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And so while he's giving this speech, she's packing her clothes. She's leaving him. And instead of saying, babe, I love you, I want you to stay, we'll work on this, he says, you lost your job 6 weeks ago. What you gonna do for rent? Where you gonna stay? You don't have a place. You don't have your own place, and you don't have money to rent a place. So, and she was saying, they had talked about these things before. So I'm assuming that over the year that they've been together, she's been trying to bring him into her faith walk so that they could do it together as a couple, and that hasn't happened. And so a year in, she now realizes it's not going to happen, and it's time for her to move on. So she packs up her things and she leaves. She gets to choir rehearsal late. She heads to choir rehearsal after she leaves there. She gets to choir rehearsal late. And then we find out from the choir director that apparently this is common. She's always late. And her best friend in the church in the choir says, he's talking about kicking you out of the choir if you were late again, and you're late again. Well, she comes in. This is the part that baffles me. How you come in the choir rehearsal late and just jump in and start leading the song. They already singing the song when you get there. How do you just jump in and lead? And the choir director made the comment, like, you came in and you threw the lead in beautifully and late. So, there's a lady, and I did not write her name down. The church busybody is what I'm going to label her. Starts giving a testimony, and Montana and her friend are talking. And the choir director was like, "You must have a testimony since you interrupting Sister So and so. You must." And so she stood up and said, "I lost my job 6 weeks ago, and I just moved out of my boyfriend's place because we were unequally yoked and what have you. Um, so I'm just asking your prayers that something come up and then I find a place." Now, meanwhile, she's securing with her homegirl that she can stay with her until she gets herself together. So the homegirl's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem, blah, blah, blah." Well, after the Miss Estelle, who I want to say, what's her name? Carmichael. I'm not sure what the last name was. But she calls her mother whatever her last name is. And the lady's like, "We have been singing on this choir together for a year. Please stop being so formal. Call me Estelle." So she calls her Miss Estelle. And Miss Estelle tells her that she's looking for a living nanny. So the job will include um, a room and food, $75,000 a year, a nanny for 2 kids, her grandchildren. And so she would come and meet the children and meet her son the next day. And that would help her with her finances and not having a job for being laid off from 6 weeks, as well as her housing situation because it's a living position. So the lady thinks really highly of her. And she asks her friend, and the friend gives her the scoop. She's like, "Okay, spill the tea. What is it?" And the tea is that the son lost his wife 5 years ago and stopped believing in God and stopped coming to church because he had been praying for her physical healing on this side, and she transitioned. And that just shook his faith to the point where he didn't believe in God. He was angry with God for taking his wife, for taking the mother of his children, and they were billionaires. I don't remember what they did, and the daughter always just said he was building the brand. So I don't know what the company was, but they were billionaires. So the next day she goes to the house. She has car trouble. She's late coming from church. It's a whole lot. She's late to the interview. And the lady, Miss Estelle, who thinks so highly of her, is not really happy that, she's trying to sell her son on this nanny. And the first impression is that the girl is late. So she meets him, and he's the aloof billionaire. "Who are you? Your presence is not really important. Mom, why is she here?" Type of thing. The kids are complete and utter brats because that's how these things go. This is the trope of a Christmas movie with the orphaned or the kids without a mother. So they don't have a mother. They're angry. They have issues about that. Their father has grown distant in the absence of their mother. So when Miss Estelle asked for his input, he's all like, "Mom, this is your thing. So, you make the decision." So she's pretty much hired on the spot. She shows her room and everything like that. The kids are like, A, we don't need a nanny. And B, did y'all really get another nanny? Like, we didn't just run the last one out of here. And when talking with her friend the night before, Montana learned that, let's see, Quentin, who is Neo, has a girlfriend, and he is dating Chloe, who is Drea Michelle. And she asks, how come his girlfriend just doesn't help him with the kids? And she was like, she is not that type of person. So, the kids are Deidre and Daniel, and they're played by Elijah Kai and Blake James. And they, their mother was a singer, sang in the church. Their dad's Neo, of course, singer, songwriter, what have you. So his character is not far from his real life self in that instance. And he pretty much just stopped music after his wife passed. So his introduction to Montana is him walking into a room and seeing her sitting at his piano about to play. And he tells her, "Do not touch that piano, is off limits." So she gets up and, walks away. So that was kind of their introduction. And he's like, you handle the kids, I'll handle my life. Boom, boom. So the kids are not, they're not really welcoming. First off, little boys playing hand pranks and what have you. Little girls just smart out of the mouth. So it's a whole lot of that. And the grandmother and the father are reprimanding them, and them not really caring because they're like, he's aloof and whatever. So, um, the little boy kind of starts to soften to her first. So Daniel softens to her and he asks her if she can roller skate, and she said a little bit. And he's like, "Will you take me skating with my girlfriend?" And I mean, this kid's all of 9, but he wants to go roller skating with his girlfriend. So she agrees to that. So they kind of hit it off, and then um, she sees that Danielle, or not Danielle, Deidre, because it's Daniel and Deidre. Deidre is upset, and she goes, and apparently Deidre has started her menstrual cycle in white pants. We've all been there, ladies. The absolute worst. And I guess if it's the first time, it's really humiliating, and then you don't have a mother to talk to about it. So she goes to her and she's like, trying. The girl's already like, "Don't try to bond with me. Don't try to make a connection. This is not what this is." And so she's, like explaining to her it happens to everybody. And she's like, the same kind of spiel that she gave her before. But she's like, "Why does everything happen to me? And all he's worried about is the business." So she was like, "Well, if you want me to help you get cleaned up, I can get cleaned up on my own. Thank you very much." And she goes off. So the next morning, she's still trying to, you know, engage these kids. And because, this is her job, she's the nanny. She's trying to engage these kids. So they make waffles, and no, they make French toast. And she was like, "Aren't you supposed to make that on the stove?" And she was like, "No, I do it this way." So she makes the French toast. She gets them to help her with the fruit and the whipped cream and everything on the waffles. And then Quentin comes in and she's like, "We made breakfast, try this." And he tries it. He's like, "You're good." The son tries it. Daniel has some and he's like, "You're good." And Deidre has some. And then Quentin looks at her and is like, because everything that Montana does, Deidre's automatically not interested in, not impressed with, whatever. And Quentin's looking at her like, "You can't even lie, like this French toast is not delicious." And she was like, "All right, it's good." And so she was like, "Well, after we after we do after we eat, we'll clean up." And the kids was like, "We don't do no dishes." And she was like, "Yeah, we do. We clean up in life and in the kitchen what we mess up. So we will be washing dishes before we go." And while she's getting to bond with the kids, she's also bonding with Quentin. Now, her and Miss Estelle already have that bond because they've been singing in the choir together for a year, and Miss Estelle thinks very highly of her. Um, so she's just pretty much trying to win over Quentin and the kids. And for her, it's a job. And so she asks Quentin, how come he never goes to church? So this is on a Sunday morning, and, they've just come back from church. And she asks him, how come he never goes? And he tells her it's none of her damn business. And then he apologizes for snapping at her. Meanwhile, his girlfriend is calling him to, and this is Drea Michelle is the girlfriend, Chloe. And Chloe's calling him to finalize details for this Christmas party that they're throwing, which is like a fundraiser. And he's like, "Yeah, I have time to talk," but he's not really paying her much attention. He's kind of ignoring her. And then he's like, "Let me call you back," because Montana is standing there grilling him about why he doesn't go to church. And so he's like, "I can show you better than I can tell you. Are you down to ride?" She says yes. They get into his car, and as she's putting her seatbelt on, he's like, "Would Chloe mind, you know, me riding with you like this?" And he was like, "Chloe is pretty much all about the money. She wants the bags and the trips and the fancy dinners and the exposure. She don't care about this." Well, they go to this mansion, another mansion, not the one that he lives in, because, like I said, this guy's a billionaire. So they go to this mansion, and he tells her that it's called Transitions. And Transitions he started after his wife's passing as kind of a tribute to her. And he volunteers there on Sundays in the morning. So while his mom goes to church, I guess the kids stay at home. You don't ever really get any understanding of that. They don't go to church. But, and he goes to Transitions. Now, when he gets to Transitions, he has this one favorite patient that you see there. Transitions is a home for terminally ill cancer patients with no insurance. Because, after watching his wife go through that and die 5 years prior, this is his new mission in life, is to help these women be as comfortable as they possibly can as they transition. So these are stage 4 or higher, you know, terminal. It's at this point there is no question. They are definitely terminal, and he houses them. And at this point he's housing, I think it's either 10 or 12 women in this mansion. And you see him with the patient Alexis, who's like his homegirl, who's always flirting with him or whatever. And she's like, you need to bring your girlfriend around. So when he shows up with Montana, she assumes it's the girlfriend until they clarify. And Montana asked if she could pray with her. And she was like, wait a minute, before you start praying, who you praying to? Because I'm a Christian most of the time. And I know some people be praying to some different stuff, and you can't pray for me if you on some different stuff than what I'm on. And that was a message, because not everybody who says let me pray for you, one, has your best interest at heart, and two, may not pray to the same God that you do. So these are things you may need to check for your own well-being, because you don't want nobody who serving Baal to pray over you. Just saying. So she prays over, and they have their connection and their moment. And she leaves, and then she's crying, and she's so sad, and she's like, it's just so sad that they're not going to get well, that she's going to die. And the woman is like, she's prepared, and she's trying to write, and she was like, she got to get her writing done before her transition. And she knows she's going to transition soon, and Neo keeps saying, not that soon, you have time. And she was like, you're lying, and I know. So after they go back to the house, while they're away at transition, so they're on their way back home, after he showed her and shared with her what transitions is and why he started it, and meeting Alexis and everything, then Montana and Quentin are driving back to Quentin's house, and pan over to Quentin's house. Chloe has shown up unannounced looking for him. And Miss Estelle is like, he is not here. Was he expecting you? And she was like, I do not need an appointment to come and see my man. And Miss Estelle clearly told her, as nicely as she could possibly tell her, honey, he ain't ever gonna marry you. Said, you can do whatever you want. You can't make that man love you if he ain't ready. And walked off. So she's already feeling some type of way. And then he walks in the door with Montana, and she was like, I've been calling you, and I've been looking for you, and you've been with her, because him and Montana went and had barbecue and a whole bunch of other stuff afterward. And she asked him, and I wrote this down in the notes because I thought it was like a really good question that never got answered. He said, that's why I volunteer at transitions on Sunday mornings. And she asked him, is it volunteering or is it apologizing for being alive? And I thought that was a very good question, because there is a lot of survivor's guilt. Now, I don't know how you could possibly have survivor's guilt when you've lost someone to cancer, because that's not something that you could have shared with them. But I know, like, when there's an accident involving several people and only one survive, or the driver survives and the passengers don't, there's a lot of survivor's guilt with stuff like that. And I felt like this question was addressing that survivor's guilt. Is it volunteering or is it apologizing for being alive? He never answered the question, and there was this awkward silence, and then they started talking about the barbecue place, and she was like, it's a good thing this barbecue joint is not closer, because I would be eating here like every day and I have to watch my spread. And he looked and was like, I don't see much of a spread. So the next morning when they were having the waffles and whatever, they were talking about, he was like, I can't have too much of this. And she was like, yeah, hashtag spread. So I thought that was cool. But I really wish that they had gone back and delved into that question, because he never answered it. So when they get back to the house, Chloe's there, and she's like, I'm looking for you. I'm calling you, blah, blah, blah. I come here and you're out with her. And Montana excused herself. And then Quentin is like, what is this? We don't do jealousy. That's not what this is. And he was like, I'm with who I want to be with. What is the problem? and she's like going off to say something to Montana, and he's standing there like, oh, what she said, and was she wearing a crop top? And then turns around to follow her, and he's sitting up there like completely lost, like, what? So anyway, I will say this: I have not seen Drea Michelle in many things. I don't know what she's famous for. I don't know her except for these couple of movies that I've seen her in. But in all the movies, she's the same. And at the beginning of this one, I thought it was kind of ill that she wasn't like the motherly figure to his kids, because if you're dating a man with kids, then you're dating a man with kids, which means you have to be involved with those kids. And she was not. So that didn't set right with me, but I thought she was like a genuine person. As the movie goes on, you find out she's not. She's exactly what he described her as, in it for the money and the status and not in it for love. But and I'm in every character that I've seen her play, that is the character. That is her character trope. So maybe she should do something else. If she has, I haven't seen it because, like I said, I don't really know much about her. I've seen her in a couple of movies where she's the airhead gold digger. Um, the other movie that I've seen her in, which is an absolute favorite, I should probably review. Uh, it's Batman from Immature, and Keisha Knight Pulliam in The Will to Love. She plays the gold digging hoochie on that as well. Um, but I can't exactly call her a gold digging hoochie. If you see the movie, you would understand. There were some circumstances which meant that's exactly who she was supposed to be. Um, but anyway, I digress. But that and this, I think, are the only two things I've ever seen her in. So, like I said, that's a bit of a character trope type of box that she's in for me because I've only seen her do those two things. Um, but anyway, so they're preparing for this Christmas thing. And the Christmas party is a fundraiser and a benefit of the Who's Who um, money people for donations to transitions. And it's going to be held at Quentin's house. And Chloe is the party organizer, so she's getting everything done. I know y'all see me keep fooling with my hair, and it's just a thing I do because I don't really look at myself. So when I'm recording, I see myself, and this one little piece of hair just keeps doing that, and it's bothering me so badly. But see, look at it, look. Ah, why? Just lay down. Anyway, when they're cleaning up after the waffles in the morning, she starts humming a Christmas song, and the kids start singing along, and she notices they have these great voices, and the teenager Deidre, really strong voice, and she said they get their singing from both of their parents, and she said that her dad kind of shut down after their mom died, and it seems like the last thing that they have to remember her by is the thing that he's bottling up and taking away from him. So they don't go to church, they can't sing in the youth choir, they don't sing at home, nobody touches the piano, this type of thing. And the kids want to sing, they want to remember their mother, and they enjoy singing. And so Montana teaches them a song, and she's talking about, trying to get them on the youth choir, and she says, we'll sing you'll sing your song as a surprise to your dad at the Christmas benefit. And first she's like, you'll just sing it at the Christmas benefit. And they're like, Dad will never allow that. And they said, that's why we're not going to tell him. So it's going to be a surprise. And they asked the kids, kids are intuitive, they know some things. They said, if we do this and Dad doesn't like it, he's going to fire you. And she said, I don't think that's going to happen because God wants me to be here. And Deidre said, if God didn't save my mother, what makes you think he's going to save your job? Very good question. And it's about, people, the movie's about people grieving and having grief and trying to find that balance within relationship with Christ and physical, emotional pain at the loss. And having lost someone at a very early age that was very close to me, I totally understood this because I never gave up on God and I never stopped believing in God. But I've been angry with God for about 31 years. And that anger has not subsided because I got questions with no answers. So I understood where this character was coming from, because if I believe in you and I pray to you and my wife believes in you and prays to you, and we have raised our kids to believe in God and trust in God and that God answers prayers, and then we all pray for my wife's healing and it doesn't come, what did you do and why are we believing in you and why are we praying? And that is a question I have oftentimes. Now I will say I have seen God work in my life enough to still have faith and still believe, but that one thing does not sit right with my soul, and it hasn't for 31 years. So these characters, I understood them because I've been them, which always makes a movie so much more realistic for me if I can relate. And so they plan this surprise. Kids learn the song, everything. It's time for. Nope, not yet. Um, Montana has a solo in the choir, and she invites the kids and Quentin along because her and Miss Estelle are already in the choir. They go to church every Sunday anyway. So, um, at this point, Miss Estelle has started the meddling mother thing because she sees that there is something between Montana and Quentin, so she keeps bringing it up. She never really says anything to Montana, but she keeps bringing it up to Quentin. Like, your wife has been gone for 5 years. I loved her. You loved her. The kids loved her. She's gone. She wouldn't want you to be by yourself, and it's time to move on. And he was like, Ma, I'm dating Chloe. And she was like, yeah, and Chloe ain't it. Period. Point blank. This is what it is. It's like Montana's a good girl. She's got a good heart. She loves your kids and your kids love her. Chloe can't even be bothered with your kids. This is not the woman you are meant to marry. They said, and if it was, you would have done so already. Because I think they had been together for some years, because Chloe was saying, it took you 3 years to get over your wife and this, that, and the other. So I think that was an ongoing thing from shortly after his wife passed. But he had never fully committed to her because his heart just wasn't in it. And for a long time, he wasn't over his wife. So he goes to church. Now, here's the thing. Chloe also goes to church every Sunday. Now, she's like, she doesn't know Montana or whatever because she only comes for the preaching. She don't have no time for the little choir performances or whatever she says. Something smart and ignorant. But she's there. So when they get to church and Chloe sees that he has come with the kids and his mom and Montana, and she's like, all these years you ain't been to church, and now all of a sudden she asks you and you show up or whatever. And so they're like arguing in the pew, and he's like, look, babe, I just came, she's singing, she asked me to come and, hear her sing. And she's like, I am not going to make a sing here. And he was like, thank you. And then she just gets up and walks out. She leaves church. So Pastor Jamal Bryant is their pastor, and he preached, and I'm sorry, I don't have the scripture, but though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And the only reason I know that is from Hezekiah Walker's Job song, because Hezekiah Walker says it at the beginning of the song. So I remember that. I don't know exactly where it is in the Bible, but I remember that passage. And so, and it was kind of poignant, of course, because he had lost his wife, and Quentin had had faith in God, and then he lost his wife, and he had stopped trusting God. So that was a poignant sermon. And Montana sang, and it was nice. And now one thing I didn't understand, and I realized these are the stars of the movie or whatever, but Montana said that she didn't have a nice dress to wear to the Christmas gala for transitions because she wore it to sing her solo. What I didn't understand is that if Montana and Miss Estelle was already members of the choir, why they ain't had no choir robe on? When I sang in the choir, the soloist didn't wear her own clothes, and everybody else wore a choir robe. Everybody wore a choir robe, so I didn't get that. But when they talked about the spread, they talked about having running trails on the property of Quentin's home. And so Montana had gone running and her feet were hurting, and he said, that's because you're running in walking shoes, but I got a guy. So he calls this guy. His guy is Gerard. Gerard is played by Jesse Malinowski. And he comes and he has this machine. He has her stand on it. I need one of these. to find her pressure points and, whatever, to find the perfect shoe for her, and then, get her running shoes or whatever. So when it's time for the gala and she doesn't have a dress, Miss Estelle calls Gerard. So Gerard got everything. Gerard is the guy. That's what Quentin says. Gerard is my guy. So whatever you need, Gerard got it. And so he comes and he has like all these different gowns and shoes and whatever. And he said, Miss Estelle said she didn't know what you were going for, so I brought so you could choose. So we had shoes and gowns, the whole nine, that she could put together an outfit for the gala. So while they were at church that morning, Rio comes to church. And Rio is still trying to make a play for her and whatever. And she was like, Rio, we are done. We are over. And he was like, well, babe, I thought this is what you wanted. I thought you wanted me to come to church. And she was like, no, I wanted us to grow in a Christian relationship together. That is not what this is. It's not just you showing up to church. And so Chloe walks up and she introduces them as her ex and Chloe as her boss's girlfriend. And so she's like, oh, well, did Montana tell you about the gala that I'm throwing? Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. You should come. Montana's like, yeah, no, that's not a good idea. She's like, oh, yeah, everybody will be there, blah, blah, blah. Because at this point, Chloe is feeling the heat and she knows that Quentin is interested in Montana in a way that he is not interested in her. And so she's like, I got to get Montana back with her man because she is going to mess me up with mine. So she, after Montana walks off and is like, well, if you want to invite him, he can be your guest. And she leaves. Chloe and Rio hatch this plan because Chloe tells Rio, if you want her back, he was like, yeah, man, with all my heart. Said, well, if she gets fired, then she's homeless because the job comes with a place to stay and she'll be back in your bed by tonight, whatever. So they hatch this plan to get her fired, and Chloe invites Rio to the gala. So it's time for the gala. Gerard then got her right, so she comes down in this beautiful yellow gown, all that, And while she's coming down the stairs, Chloe comes over and is like, babe, what's up? And he's, mesmerized because you know how it is. You got to make the entrance down the stairway. This is every Hallmark, Lifetime, every movie. You have to make that entrance. So she's making that entrance and his, attention is on that entrance. And Chloe's like, hey, babe, I'm right here. So she goes off. He talks to Montana for a bit. Chloe comes back with Rio and introduces Rio to Quentin as Chloe, or as Montana's boyfriend, and is like, you are not my boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. They're going back and forth. And it doesn't go off without a hitch the way that Chloe was expecting. Like, okay, Rio shows up, it's Montana's boyfriend, Quentin is no longer interested or whatever. So they go outside and they're talking, and Chloe is, dragging down Montana and this, that, and the other. And then she shows him, she was like, I just sent you a text, check your phone. So he checks his phone and there are nudes of Montana. And she was like, yeah, that's your little choir girl, holy roller, posing naked and putting it on what or some site, some like made up, not real site, black something. And he sees that and he's already mad because at this point, after the introductions, before they get outside, the kids sing the song and he was like, she just went too far. She got him singing, she playing the piano, she just went too far. And Chloe's like, yeah, babe, you should fire her because she didn't clear that with you. She didn't even clear that with me, and I'm the event planner. And he asks Chloe, do you want me to fire her because she was wrong in what she done, or do you want me to fire her because you want to eliminate the competition? And she was like, competition? So that's when she starts running her down and sends him the pictures. And she was like, yeah, your little holy roller is posing nude on internet sites and blah, blah, blah. So he goes back in and he fires her for, the kids singing and playing on the piano or whatever. Because initially, remember I told you when he first met her, he told her the piano was off limits. So Um, she was like, if you're upset and you're firing me for disobeying you, that is one thing, but don't call my character into question ever. And he was like, oh yeah. And then he shows her the pictures, and she's trying to explain to him that she never posted those pictures on any site. But he don't want to hear it because he's already mad because, you know, she's dredging up all those old feelings about his wife, and he feels like she's overstepped her bounds. And then she's watching his kids and she's posing nude on internet sites. So he goes away. She goes back into the party and talks to Rio, and she says, you told me that you got rid of those pictures. And he was like, you know, trying to explain, you know, why they needed to get back together. Where he's still, you know, on this, you know, babe, we meant to be kick. And she slapped him in his face and told him, if you come near me again, if you contact me again, text or call me, I promise you I will call the police. She storms out. Mom is like, you know, you didn't hire her, so you can't fire her. Because mom, technically, Miss Estelle, hired Montana to be the nanny for the kids. And the kids are like, you know, we're finally starting to open up. We're finally starting to be seen. Someone's paying attention to us. And he gets rid of the only person who's paying us any attention. And he's still not paying us any attention. So after his mom comes in to talk to him, and she was like, you know, we all lost something. You weren't the only one who lost your wife. We all lost your wife. I loved her like a daughter. That is the mother of your children. We all lost something, but it's time to get over it. And Montana is good for them kids, and Montana is good for you. And, you know, and he had told Montana when I was starting to, and he was about to say, you know, just when I was starting to fall in love with you, but he didn't even just finish that sentence. He was just like, go. So he went to find her. He found her at the church, and she had already called her homegirl from the choir, like, you know, I'm gonna need a place to stay because this thing done fell through. Now, every time she calls the homegirl to say she needs a place to stay, of course the girl's like, girl, come on, I got you. She stayed like one night the whole movie. So he comes and he apologizes and he explains to her, you know, why it bothered him. And he said, you know, you were the answer to my prayers. He said, I sat there at that piano, and they were in the church, and he had been a really active member of the church with his wife and his kids and his mom before his wife died. And he says, I sat there at that piano and I asked God to heal my heart so that I could love again, and you were the answer to that prayer, and I wasn't even realizing it. And by the time I realized it, it was just warring with me on the inside. And he explained more about his wife and that relationship or whatever. They apologized, and he said, okay, you are part of this family. The kids want you back. My mom wants you back. I want you back. Come home. And then they sing this song. And the song that she taught the kids that they sang at the Christmas gala was Everything I Need at Christmas, and that was written and produced by Myron Butler. And then after the apology, and, you know, her and Quentin are now going to be together and they're going home, they sit down at the piano that he used to play with his wife in the church, and they sing Sent Me a King, which was written and produced by Jonathan McReynolds. Now, I didn't know this because I like Neo, but I'm not like a Neo fan. So apparently his name is Schaefer Smith, because in the credits it says the song is sang by Schaefer Smith and Soraya McNeil. Never knew this dude's name was Schaefer. So there's that. So they sang that song, and then they go home, and it's Christmas and happily ever after. And, you know, because you have to have that happily ever after, or was it even worth watching the movie? And they move on. So they're in church and they're singing. And again, these choir members not in choir robes. It's the family and then the choir. The choir's in robes, but Montana, Miss Estelle, Quentin, Deidre, and Daniel are not. They dress to the nines in their own clothes because Quentin used to sing in the church before his wife passed. So Pastor Jamal Bryant was like, you know, whatever it takes to get you back. So he was like, I just came to hear Montana sing. He said, well, I'll put Montana up every Sunday if it'll get you back. So once, you know, the healing has occurred and everything, the whole family goes back to church and they sing Christmas Carol, traditional Christmas song. And because Chloe always comes late, because she don't come to hear the choir, she come to hear the preaching, and then she leaves, she shows up late. Well, when she gets to church, there's a police officer standing in the front of the church and asks her name. And when she gives her name, he's like, you know, you're under arrest. And she was like, man, go ahead. Anybody got time for that? And he was like, no, really, you're under arrest. She was under arrest for distribution of pornography. Now, I don't know this law or how it really works, because I thought that only worked with distribution of pornography of minors. I thought that was the law. couldn't share kitty porn, texting naked pictures, and what have you, blah blah blah, you get charges. Apparently, in Georgia, maybe, or just for this movie script, who knows? Um, you get charges for passing on pornography of an adult. So because she got the pictures from Rio and she posted them to the site and then sent the website link to Quentin, she was charged with distribution of pornography. She was arrested in front of the church, and she's on, but y'all go tell the bishop this is happening. I don't think the bishop was really concerned because that was the end of it. But yeah, she got arrested for doing that. And I'm like, everything I see her in, she's not the upstanding character. So I would like to see her be the upstanding character in something. But this was a good movie. BET Plus, The Sound of Christmas, Neo and Soraya. Check it out. This is your girl T signing off from T's Corner. And everybody have a blessed holiday season.